Picture the Sahara at noon. Now imagine it isn't sand anymore, just a dark, glassy ocean of solar panels stretching beyond the horizon in every direction. Then picture cities across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East powering up on sunlight captured in North Africa. It sounds like the clean energy cheat code, until you realize the Sahara isn't just empty land, it's part of Earth's climate system. So here's the big question. What if we covered the Sahara Desert with solar panels? Would it power the world, or accidentally rewrite weather patterns? The Sahara is the largest hot desert on Earth, with a commonly cited area around 8.6 million square kilometers, though the exact boundary shifts as the desert expands and contracts. That's not a solar farm, that's a continent-scale energy machine spanning multiple countries with sand seas, rocky plateaus, mountains, and harsh logistics everywhere. And when something gets that big, it stops acting like a normal project. It starts acting like a new surface of the planet, because at that scale, the land itself matters to climate. But the reason people keep bringing up this idea is simple. The sunlight is intense, and the math gets ridiculous fast. Let's do simple, honest napkin math, not magic. First, modern commercial solar panels often sit around 20% efficiency for converting sunlight into electricity, with variation by technology and market segment. Second, even in great solar locations, solar power doesn't produce at full output all the time. In real-world conditions, the average output across a year is much lower than the peak because of night, seasons, weather, dust, and heat. Now, global electricity generation in 2023 was about 29,925 terawatt-hours in a widely reported global summary. So what happens if we scale solar across a Sahara-sized area? The Sahara's area is about 8.6 million square kilometers, about 8.6 trillion square meters. Even if the average delivered power worked out to only a few tens of watts per square meter across the year, the total becomes enormous. Bottom line, in pure energy potential, yes, Sahara-scale solar could generate far more electricity than the world currently produces. That's the exciting part. But that's where the story flips, because the Sahara isn't just a place to collect power, it reflects sunlight back to space, and changing that reflectivity can change heat and airflow. There's a key climate word here, albedo. Albedo is basically how reflective a surface is, how much sunlight it bounces away instead of absorbing. Desert sand is relatively bright compared to a dark solar panel. If you replace a reflective surface with a darker one, more solar energy is absorbed as heat at the surface. More surface heat can change the air above it. Warm air rises, rising air can pull in surrounding air, and that can affect clouds and rainfall, especially when changes are large and persistent. So now the question is bigger than electricity. Could Sahara solar change weather patterns? And this is where the idea gets genuinely surprising. Climate models have been used to test this kind of scenario. In at least one major study, researchers modeled very large wind and solar farms in the Sahara and found outcomes consistent with warmer local temperatures and substantial increases in precipitation in nearby regions, along with more vegetation. That does not mean solar panels will make the Sahara green in real life. It means that under certain model setups, large land surface changes can trigger rainfall and vegetation feedbacks. So even small shifts in rainfall patterns can have huge consequences for ecosystems and people, because water is everything in dry regions. So the biggest risk isn't that the panels don't work, it's that the planet responds in complicated ways. But before we get carried away, the Sahara has a boss fight waiting: dust. Solar panels love sunlight. Dust blocks sunlight, and deserts produce lots of dust. Soiling losses can be severe in dusty environments. In extreme conditions, losses can spike after dust events, and the yearly impact can become very large if cleaning and design are not handled well. So you clean the panels, but cleaning at Sahara scale becomes a mega project of its own. Water can be scarce, and cleaning systems cost money, energy, and maintenance.
And then there's heat. Hotter panels generally perform worse, and elevated panel temperature is a known contributor to real-world performance losses. So yes, the Sahara has huge solar potential, but it also charges a constant dust and heat tax for living there. Except, one detail refuses to fit. Even if you generate mind-blowing power, can you move it to where people need it? Electricity is picky. It must be balanced every second, and solar output rises and falls with the sun. To export Sahara-scale power over long distances, one key technology is high-voltage direct current. Over very long distances, it can reduce losses compared to typical alternating current lines, but it still loses power along the way and needs major converter stations at both ends. That helps, but the distances are still enormous, and building that much transmission means land access, converter stations, security, maintenance, and long-term political cooperation. And it doesn't solve the night problem. When the sun sets, solar output drops, so you need storage, backup generation, flexible demand, or a grid that spans time zones. So the most realistic version of Sahara Solar is not one single export hose, it's a network. Some power used locally, some exported, all carefully balanced. But even if you handle dust and transmission, there's another twist people don't expect. Solar farms can change local temperatures. In real-world measurements, researchers have observed what's been called a photovoltaic heat island effect at a utility-scale solar plant. In that study, nighttime temperatures over the solar area were often about 3 to 4 degrees Celsius warmer than nearby wildlands. This doesn't mean solar is worse than fossil fuels. Fossil fuels add long-lived greenhouse gases. This effect is about local land surface energy balance and airflow, more like how cities stay warmer at night. But it does mean that if you build solar at extreme scale, you should expect local environmental changes, and you'll need monitoring and design choices to reduce harm. At Sahara scale, these effects could interact with dust, winds, and clouds in complex ways, which is why model results are interesting, but not a promise. And now we reach the layer that decides whether megaprojects survive: resources, supply chains, and end-of-life planning. Solar panels don't appear out of thin air. Scaling them requires materials, factories, shipping, and maintenance parts over decades. As clean energy scales up, demand rises for certain minerals and industrial inputs. Supply concentration, bottlenecks, and geopolitical risk can all shape how fast projects can grow. Then comes end-of-life. As solar deployment grows, end-of-life management becomes a serious issue. Planning for reuse and recycling matters because waste volumes can rise sharply over time. A Sahara-sized build would mean you aren't just building panels, you're building a permanent industrial ecosystem: installation, cleaning, repairs, replacements, and recycling capacity for decades. And if the project claims to be green, it has to prove it across the whole life cycle, not just the first shiny year. But there's a smarter twist. Instead of exporting every watt, you can use some of the energy near the source for things deserts struggle with, like water. One major local use for large renewable power is desalination, especially on nearby coasts. Desalination can turn seawater into fresh water, but it costs energy. Energy requirements vary by technology, and electricity can be a major cost driver for modern desalination systems. This doesn't mean solar panels will solve Sahara water. Moving water inland is its own infrastructure challenge, and desalination also produces concentrated brine that must be managed responsibly. But it shows a realistic path. Sahara Solar doesn't have to be only about exporting power. It can support regional grids, local industry, cooling, and water systems, benefits that can be felt nearby. And now the final flip. The real what if isn't whether we can cover the Sahara, it's what we learn when we try to think at that scale. In reality, nobody is likely to carpet the entire Sahara with solar panels. The environmental uncertainty, dust maintenance, transmission build-out, and geopolitical complexity are too extreme. But the core idea remains powerful. Desert regions have enormous solar potential, and large solar plants can deliver strong performance in high sun areas, if designed for real conditions. The most plausible future looks like a distributed network: many large solar sites in suitable zones, reinforced regional grids, long-distance transmission where it makes sense, and careful environmental monitoring as deployment grows.
It also requires systems thinking: land, climate, water, minerals, recycling, and fairness in who benefits, because at megascale, energy policy becomes Earth system policy. So, if we ever build anything remotely Sahara scale, the most important technology might not be the solar cell. It might be cooperation, long-term planning, and humility, because the planet always gets a vote.